Welcome back to another episode on the Aaron Doughty podcast. My name's Aaron Doughty, and I just got done recording this episode on attracting love, doing shadow work. We touch on understanding more about anxious, avoidant, and secure love attachment styles, which once you understand, by the way, it really helps you understand all your relationships in the past. It helps you understand why people may be distant, why people may hold themselves back, why you may attract emotionally unavailable men or women, why you might find yourself needing relationship. It explains it all. And this honestly is it's a very powerful episode if your intention is to attract love or to make the relationships you currently have even more depth, or even just to understand love in the past, attracting love and how different dynamics have worked so that you can do the inner work to attract more of a loving relationship. Towards the end of the episode, I kind of share this pattern that really was mind-blowing to me. I've always attracted a one-on-one match of my own love relationships has been depending on who I was being. So if I was working a 9-to-5 job I hated, I'd be with someone else that worked a 9-to-5 job they hated. And there'd be a certain level of depth there. As I would go deeper within myself, it didn't be a deeper connection, but as then I went full-time doing what I love, I met someone that was full-time doing what they love. You meet people based on a direct reflection of who you are. And it's very interesting how that works, but it's all reflection. This really is an inner game as well. When it comes to attracting love and doing shadow work, the more you change your story about love, your story about men, your story about women, your story about life, these beliefs, the more you change the outer reflection. Because all the outer reflection is in reality is it's a mere reflection. It's mirroring back to you what you think you deserve. It's mirroring back to you who you think you are. It's mirroring back to you how you're showing up in the world. And when you change it, I promise you, your whole entire life will change. That's how you attract love. It's also a part of having what they call magnetic energy. You being at your core, your authentic core. Wish it could be just as easy as always taking Organifi Green, that stuff that I use for energy, having magnetic energy, feeling like alive. This podcast is sponsored by Organifi. If you guys didn't know, I'm a huge fan of Organifi. The supplements Organifi is... I use the protein. They have a chocolate protein that is very delicious, and it digests very well. It's got enzymes in it. Organifi also has this green drink that has a whole bunch of servings of vegetables in it. I take that. It's how I normally break my fast every morning. I take that with a little bit of water, and it helps with energy. I don't drink caffeine. I don't do coffee. I don't do tea. I do Organifi Green, and that has been the best thing I found for energy. Plus, it's very good for the inside of the body as well. And then the third thing I always use, I literally just got a shipment yesterday from Organifi, and it's huge box full, and it was like 3 chocolate golds, 3 green, Organifi Green, and then also Organifi chocolate protein. The Organifi Gold you drink at night before you're going to bed. It's got turmeric and some other like reishi mushroom extracts and stuff, and it helps me sleep super good at night. I have very deep sleep, and I can know I have deep sleep because I have this thing called a Whoop where I track my sleep. And the nights that I drink that Organifi Gold, I notice I have much better REM sleep and what is called deep sleep. That's just what I noticed for myself. And I'm a huge fan of Organifi. So if you haven't checked out Organifi yet, it is my go-to supplements. It's the only supplements I really use. I don't think there's really much else I use at all. And you go to Organifi, organifi.com/Aaron, AARON. You get 15% off by going there. You'll see a little code at the top. Put in Aaron15 or whatever the code says. And you get 15% off. You can try Organifi Protein. It's a complete protein. It's vegan as well. Or Organifi Green or Organifi Gold. Anything. They have other stuff as well. But those are the top 3 things that I use every single day. That's why I always talk about them. And once again, you can go to Organifi, organifi.com/Aaron, AARON. Put in that code at the top. You get 15% off. And with that being said, we're going to go deep in this episode on attracting love by using shadow work right meow. Welcome back to another episode on the Aaron Doughty podcast. My name is Aaron Doughty, and today what we're going to do is go really deep in understanding attracting love and understanding shadow work, and how many times shadow work is the key to you either attracting love or having the relationships that are in your life become much deeper. And this is also something that as you begin to do, it flips the script, because normally when people are thinking about attracting love, they are focused on the outer external world. The question in their mind is, how can I get this person over here and attract them into my life? And they're focused on the outside. And attracting love is really an inside game. It is about the more you go within yourself, the more you do the shadow work. And now shadow work, you may have heard me talk about it before. The shadow comes from maybe Carl Jung, who I don't know if he coined the term, but he definitely used to talk a lot about shadow work. It has to do with the unconscious part of ourself. This is the reason I think a lot of people may intend to attract love into their life. They may focus and do all the things the movie The Secret said. They'll do the little feng shui things. Like one feng shui thing people do is they'll put like things next to each other. So if you have instead of having one thing, put something next to it, and then you're going to start to subconsciously see things in groups of two. Then you're going to attract more love into your life. Now, is that true? It's a permission slip. I think what some people do is they look at that, they do that, and then they're on the lookout and expecting love to come in their life. And then when it does, it's like, well, it was because I did the feng shui thing. I know when I first moved into this house, a feng shui person came to the house, and I had a lot of pictures of one thing. Like, for example, there's a wave picture behind me right now. If you guys don't know, by the way, I do the recordings of these podcast episodes on my second YouTube channel called Aaron Doughty Podcast. And sometimes I reference visual cues and stuff. But I had this one really cool painting of a big ass tree. And it's just one tree, though. So subconsciously, I'm only going to attract more of being alone because I have this tree and it's only one tree. You see what I mean? And so when I hear these things and it's about feng shui or it's about whatever, it's just a permission slip. Is it inherently true? No, I've been to, I live in a one house in Sedona. What that means is the numerology of the house, because the number of the house, the digits add up to 1 when you singlify it down to one digit. Because it equals 1, normally in numerology what that means is, this is not good for being in a relationship. And the guy that I have the house with, my buddy Drew, him and I got the house together as an investment house, but we both live there. He has his girlfriend, Rebecca, there. And they're in a relationship. So is it the end all be all because of this? Or is it that we should all move into a 2 house because 2 is more numerologically friendly to being in a relationship? You see what I mean? These things are all tools. They're powerful tools. But sometimes I think what people, when they're intending to attract love, they gravitate to the quick fix. It's like the 6-minute abs, And of course, wouldn't it be amazing if it was 6 minutes of abs? And technically, if you do 6 minutes a day of this ab workout, then the idea is you're eventually going to get abs or whatever. But the truth is, it's not about that at all. It's 98% is about diet, right? It's about your how are you being on a day-to-day basis? And are you eating food at a degree to where you're not in a calorie surplus? That's the idea, right? It's mainly diet. But the 6-minute abs, it's once all that fat burns away, then you can see the abs. In the same way, when it comes to attracting love, it's not one technique. It's not because you put 2 shampoo bottles next to each other in your shower that you're going to attract love. But maybe that's your belief system. Some people, I think, have that belief system, and it may actually serve some people. It's not about taking down your pictures of one thing and then putting something else. It's about changing who you are being at the being level by doing the inner work and bringing things to awareness. So in this episode specifically, I want to talk about shadow work that has to do directly with attracting love and understanding the different elements to it. There's different layers. Now, the first layer I want to talk about is going to be about your association with love itself. What is your story about love? Is love something that is painful And normally, if you want to know your story about love, look to your parents. What did your parents model to you growing up? My parents were divorced when I was like 5 years old. Nothing surprising there. A lot of people, I think, had divorced parents. But then after my parents divorced, there was a lot of pain. And then my dad met my ex-stepmom, who was emotionally, mentally, physically abusive. And then they were together for 7 or 8 years. Then they broke up. And then my ex-stepmom was lying about different things and ended up pretending like she only made a certain amount of money per year so that she'd get way more of my dad's money after the divorce. And it was just like literally, I could see how painful it was for my dad to go through this divorce. So subconsciously, my story about love was that I have to protect myself and that if I ever get married, I'm getting a prenup. That was pretty much my story about love. And as I became aware of this, I could see that I was actually in many ways blocking love for coming into my life because I had a negative association to like long-term commitment. And that was something that I had to really become aware of. Now, even beyond just your stories about love, the other question I have for you, this is work that I've been doing myself. What is your story about women? What is your story about men? So it's first off your story about love. And become aware, like, what am I afraid would happen if I met this person that I fell in love with? Maybe you're afraid you're going to be too vulnerable. You're going to open up and they may judge you. Maybe you're afraid that there would be divorce or that there would be some type of pain or you're going to lose your freedom. Maybe you're afraid that by choosing someone, you're going to miss out on the real soulmate, the real twin flame that's supposed to come your way or something. And then become aware of your story. And as you become aware of these stories, you're going to see that these stories many times aren't your own. Many times they may even be the subconscious stories of your parents, your grandparents. Or if they are, you can see that you agreed to this story at a young age and you weren't as aware and woke as you are now. Now you're woke. Now you are so woke that you can tell that these stories that you have about love are holding you back or keeping certain things from coming into your life. But beyond just your story about love, what is your story about men and women, dating them? So for me, I realized that I had this story that I associated women with trying to control me. And the interesting thing is that this was a direct reflection into my life until I became aware of this story. Now, a story is a belief. I just say story because it's a little bit more relatable. We say belief because belief, people think this is an abstract thing, but everyone knows what a story is because we watch movies and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, well, and when you tell yourself a story, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily inherently has to be true. You could see it for what it is, a story. Now, for example, when my dad broke up with my ex-stepmom when I was 16, 17 years old, I then had all this freedom, and this freedom was amazing. I was allowed to have friends. I was allowed to eat the kind of food I want. I was allowed to have my hair the way I want because before I had to put my hair to the side. I had to tuck in my shirt. I was like this I had to be like this certain way. And then all of a sudden I had all this freedom, which was freaking amazing. But I had this subconscious story about women, that women are trying to control me. The first girlfriend I ever attracted into my life, I was with for like years, and she was very jealous. She was always trying to control me, and very, in a way, similar energy to my ex-stepmom. Not to that degree, obviously, but she was very, absolutely very jealous and trying to control what I was too loud, I was hanging out with friends too much, like all this stuff, and that was one of my fears. I was afraid of being controlled because I was controlled for so many years, 6, 7 years, and wasn't allowed to have freedom. What ended up happening is then I resisted being controlled at all. But because anything you resist, you'll notice that you lean against, that you push away from. Anything you resist normally is a pattern there in your life somehow because you're subconsciously imposing it. So she was in my life for like 4 years. And also, I realized that I had a pattern that I developed for my dad. I'll talk a little bit about this as well. You could do shadow work with your parents by understanding their patterns. My dad was in the relationship with my ex-stepmom for like 4 or 5 years longer than he needed to. He knew it wasn't right, but he was in it because it was comfortable. He was used to it. There was certainty there. And I took on that same pattern. I was in this relationship, even though it wasn't a positive relationship. I felt like I was in a little box, just like I was with my ex-stepmom in a way. I was always in trouble. She was always mad at me. And then eventually, I came to my senses and I broke up with her. It's actually a pretty dramatic breakup. I had this breakup plan. It's going to sound kind of douchebaggy, but I was with a whole bunch of friends and we were in the backyard and I had this breakup plan and I was like, I'm going to break up with, I needed like a couple months to break up with her because she was so attached to me that I was afraid for her like health. She's like somebody that if I were to break up with her, she would threaten to do all this stuff and like it was something I wanted to plan out. So I was like, okay, I'm going to plan out this breakup. And what happened was actually I had a friend, like actually a really good friend of mine, who had this crush on her. It's kind of an interesting story. Had this crush on her. And what happened was towards the end of the relationship, I was like, I just wanted out, but I was too much of a bitch to like just fucking end it and say, hey, I'm done. It's a long time ago. This is before I was woke as fuck. So what I did is I would do all these like passive aggressive things where I'd be like a dick to her. And what eventually happened is my good friend of mine was like then starting to like take sides with her, even though he knew like, hey, I'm trying to get out of this friggin' relationship. And he was there when I said this thing where I was like, I have like 3 months. I want to be broken up with her. Like, you're like, you know how you have a goal? You're like, hey, I want to accomplish X, Y, Z in like 6 months. Mine was like in 3 months, I want to break up with her. And I could have just done it, but I was like trying to like prepare her or something like that. I don't know. I was because our lives were so intertwined. I was like, and still am like good friends with her brothers and stuff like that. So it was like this thing where it was a unique situation. But basically there was this then beef that I had with like literally my best friend, and we had this beef, and then I said something to like trigger him, and he was around her, so he goes, why don't you tell her about the 3-month breakup plan you have, huh? And she was like, what? And then she started freaking the fuck out. And then what happened is it was interesting because her brothers I was so close with her whole family. Her family still fucking loves me. It's interesting. But I then had to like go get something from her house or something. It was like this dramatic breakup, and then I left, and then that was it. And then for a long time, like months, she kept trying to get back. She kept trying to get a hold of me. She kept trying to text me. She kept trying to like bribe me to get back in the relationship, and I had to like eventually block her. And after that relationship, like a couple weeks, within weeks, I got transferred. I was working at Nordstrom's and women's shoes. No, BP shoes, Brass Plum shoes. I then got transferred to a better department called salon shoes. That was an interesting story as well. The way the universe works. So this is what happened here. Okay, I'm just gonna tell some stories today. I know attract love, but by doing these shadow work, you become aware of these different patterns. You know what I mean? So I was in this department. I was in women's shoes, or BP shoes. It's like the same thing. It's just cheaper, like Jessica Simpson, Steve Madden shoes. And there's a price point. It's commission sales job. So you get paid a 10% commission on whatever you sell, and that's what I loved about it is I can kind of make my own paychecks. That's where I learned about the law of attraction, because every day I went in, I started at zero. And there was this manager of that department, assistant manager, and she was the manager for a while, and I had so much energy. This is my ADHD days when I just had very unbalanced energy, and I would just do so many random loud things because I think I was in a bubble when I was 7 to 16 years old. I think after I came out of that bubble, I just had all this energy. Because some people in high school would see the way that I am now, and they would be like, whoa, because I was in like a prison. I was in like this little box. I wasn't allowed to be my true self. I was afraid. Like if people wanted to hang out, I'd have to come up with excuses why I couldn't hang out, because I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to like really leave the house. And then after my dad divorced my stepmom, all of a sudden I had friends, and then I came out of my shell and my personality came out. And when my personality came out, it came out very loudly. I was like, oh, I can have fun now. And it was like, and especially that 9-to-5 job that I had at I worked at Nordstrom's for years. And when I was going to work every day, I would just mess around. I'd like mess with customers. I would pretend to be like Italian. I'd talk with like an Italian accent, and I would like just do this stupid stuff just for fun, just self-amusement. And there was this one assistant manager there that thought I was obnoxious. So when she was at a manager meeting, like a lunchtime manager meeting, not like an official manager meeting, she told all the other, like 7 other managers there that she thought, department managers, that she was convinced that I was on coke. Okay? Never done coke in my life, all right? And what happened was she said that, and one of the managers was actually good friends with me. So she's like, hey, and she was like real cool, she's down to earth. She's like, hey, Aaron, I just want you to know that this person said this about you. And it was my assistant manager. And I was like, what? My assistant manager said that? Like, I'm not. First off, I just have a lot of energy. It was to the point where if I took a couple shots of espresso, I'd be very calm. Had the opposite effect on me. And but I did have a lot of energy, so I could see why she thought that. But anyways, I said, hey, yo, can I talk to you? And I went out and I talked to her at the E-bar at Nordstrom's. And I said, hey, I want you to know that I heard that you said this, and I won't go to HR, but what you have to do is you have to tell every single person that it's not true and that you shouldn't have said that. And then she's like, she's like, she felt really bad. And then what happened, because the other assistant manager was a friend of mine. She's like, you're my friend, and I really respected that she did that. I thought she was really cool. The friend that told me about that. And then, so I told her that. So guess what? She wanted to then transfer me. She then pushed. She's like, okay, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, okay, she then pushed and had motivation to get me out of her department and into salon shoes. Salon shoes is a much higher price point, much better department to work. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. It actually worked out really well for me. I stood up for myself, and guess what? I got transferred to a department where I was making like 20% more. It's like an immediate 10, 15, 20% increase in pay because the price point's so much more and the customers that are on that side of the floor are much better. So, guess what? That was something that then led me to another pattern. So then the manager of salon shoes was extraordinarily controlling and was almost the same exact personality as my ex-stepmom. And she was in my life for like literally I was in salon shoes for probably 3 years before I quit. And we could not get this chick fired. We tried so many times to get her fired. Going to HR, saying, because she would do and create, she'd make people cry. She'd like such a power tripper. Very similar and very manipulative, just like my ex-stepmom. So once again, I break up with that ex-girlfriend. 2 weeks later, I get transferred to salon shoes, and I have a manager that is controlling me. My beliefs about women were keeping women that were trying to control me inside of my life. And I wasn't even aware of it until I learned meditation. When I learned meditation, that's when everything really began to change. And I learned meditation mainly because I was doing and had what they call ADHD, and there were harsh side effects of taking Adderall, which you couldn't sleep very much, you couldn't eat very much. So I was like, I did my own research, and guess what I found? I found this stuff called meditation, and as woo-woo as it sounded, I was like, man, there's something I think that's powerful about this. And I tried it. After a couple days, nothing really crazy happened, but about the third or fourth day, I started to feel completely different. I started to observe my thoughts rather than react to my thoughts. And as I did that, there was this spaciousness that began to grow inside of me. And after that, I started to become aware of so much in my life. It was really awareness. 90% of transformation is awareness, is what the Toltecs talk about. And what I became aware of was that I had this story about women. I had this story about my ex-stepmom and how that pattern was still in my life. I was becoming aware of all these patterns. And then I began to question them. Does it have to be true? And the funny thing is, as I began to question them, guess what happened? Literally, as I learned meditation, once again, it took 2 weeks for me to break up with that chick. Or no, it took 2 weeks from the time I broke up with that chick for me to get transferred to salon shoes. And then it took about 2 weeks from when I learned meditation for that manager to get fired for the most ridiculous, stupid thing. I don't even remember what it was. It had something to do with the scheduling process. Like, she didn't give someone the schedule and someone was on maternity leave. I forget. It was something really stupid. But there was like one time I knew I could have got her fired. What she did is there were people on the sales floor. I had these, I wore these pants, and I have like especially for like a guy, I have like a big butt. It's just like my dad had it, I got it. So what happened was I was on the sales floor and I was wearing these pants. You know, you wear like a suit normally, but this time I didn't have to wear a suit. I was wearing like this, I was wearing these pants that made my butt look big or whatever, or it was just there. And then what happened is I had my pockets were kind of bunched up in my butt area. So the manager, she comes over and goes, "Aaron, you have all these like receipt papers in your pocket." And she like reaches down, grabs out the receipt paper out of each of my pockets, and it looked like it's obvious that like she was feeling my ass. And as I was doing it, there was a customer that was sitting down about 15 feet away, looking like with the most crazy look on her face, like, what the hell is going on right now? Why is that lady doing that to his pockets? Because it looked so intrusive, right? And she grabbed these receipt paper, and she's like, oh, she didn't think anything of it. But I was like, wow, I was like, that's like, if that were the other way around, holy shit, you know what I mean? But then I didn't realize it though. I could have gone to HR then and threatened it. And people had threatened going to HR before, but nothing really happened because they were able to protect her. She was protected by upper management. But that would have been a for sure thing, because if I would have threatened for lawsuit that would have been game over, right? Like sexual harassment. But for some reason, it never happened. But what happened is 2 weeks after learning that meditation practice and becoming aware of that story, she left my life, and I've never had to deal with somebody trying to control me like that again. I have had a couple little narcissistic people come into my life here and there for me to just kind of become aware of and either stand up to them or ignore them, or like as a lesson, but not like that had to be in my life. You know, now I work for myself too, but I've had one or two other narcissists that I've kind of had to stand up for it and like really let go of that pattern. But it's super interesting how old patterns fall away when you do this. Now, yes, this wasn't just around love. This was also around, my manager. It was around love at one point. Now, this is key though to changing the kind of love and the shadow work that you attract, or the love that you attract in your life. If you have a belief that men are emotionally unavailable because maybe your dad was emotionally unavailable, if you have a belief that men cannot be trusted, this is probably one of the biggest one for women. Most of my audience is women as well. Do you believe that you can trust masculine energy? At a certain time in your past, were you let down by masculine energy? Can you not trust that masculine energy? Because if not, then what happens is you have to put up a masculine shield. If you can't trust the masculine energy in your life, you have to put up a masculine shield, and you're going to find yourself intending to embody more masculine qualities. You're going to get on top of your business. You're going to do all these things to push ahead. And what happens many times is people become unbalanced and they overemphasize that masculine mask. And then when they do get in a relationship, there may be a lack of sexual polarity there because there is a level to where you think you have to completely embody the masculine. You can't go into your feminine. And that has to do with trust. And then you may shut down sexually because you don't feel like you can trust. Be a fear of intimacy because you don't feel like you can trust. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about, I have another episode. I shouldn't make the other one go out before this so I can reference that episode, but it has to do with love attachment style. We all have a certain love attachment style. Those attachment styles are anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, or secure attachment. Secure attachment, I don't think really is an attachment. It's just like means you're good. So anxious attachment means that you lean in and that you crave the love. And if you want to fix if there's something going on between you and someone else, you're anxious if you worry if someone's going to text you back or not, if you're afraid that someone's going to leave you. Anxious attachment has to do with craving and leaning in. Then you have avoidant attachment. Avoidant attachment means that you push away and that you want your space, that you associate more pleasure with being independent, and that you'll normally justify reasons why it's better that you remain that distance, and you're afraid of getting really close. This is sometimes when there's a fear of intimacy, fear of sexual connection. And a lot of that has to do with because there was, at a certain point in your past, you had some level of trust that was broken. And then now it's like it's not safe to get too close. That's when the avoidant is there. Secure means you're able to give and receive love easily. Really, it's about giving and receiving love. The anxious has no problem giving love, but has problem receiving love and knowing they're worthy. The avoidant has no problem receiving love, but has problem giving love because they're afraid that they're going to become too close and intimate, and that equals pain because they were and had some level of trust broken when they were younger. And then secure can give and receive love easily, which means their parents most likely demonstrated that to them, and it means that they're the best of both qualities. They can, avoidant is very independent. They are both independent, but also not afraid of fear of intimacy or sexual connection. So it's like secure is like the ideal. And if you had a great childhood, then maybe that was you, or you've already done the healing work, then maybe you became more secure. But it's from a book called Attached, and it talks about these three. And you'll notice that you gravitate towards one of these more so than the others. And the healing work, the shadow work, is becoming aware of why you are this way. Now, anxious attachment means that there's some belief, there's some childhood trauma or experience that revolves around not feeling worthy and craving your parents' love, craving some level of nurturing that maybe you didn't receive. I didn't receive as much nurturing growing up, especially because of the painful ex-stepmom situation, but even before that, I have this theory that I haven't heard anyone else talk about, but whatever your mom was or your predominant parent was, you fall into the polarity of the opposite normally. So my mom was avoidant. My real mom, not my stepmom. My real mom is more avoidant. Why? She's avoidant because she was abused growing up, and she ran away from home when she was 12, 13 years old, and she then was a foster kid. So my grandparents, when I talk about my grandpa, that's my foster grandpa. It's not my biological grandpa, but nonetheless, it's still my grandpa. But you guys see what I mean. And my mom had that trust broken, so then that caused her to become avoidant. And because she was avoidant, and she was also going through stuff when I was young, emotionally, I think I craved that nurturing, that love, and that then caused me to be more anxious love attachment until I worked and did the shadow work to become secure. You can do the shadow work. You can become secure. I don't care what the book says. I don't care what anyone else says. You are who you choose to be right now in the present moment. You are not your past, okay? Doing the shadow work here is about becoming aware of these things that happened in the past and healing your inner child. When you heal your inner child, you will feel more secure, you will feel more love, and you will start to generate that love from within. The book Attached, it kind of says that one of the best, the way that you heal through this is you find someone that's secure. Because by finding someone that's secure, you're going to be more secure. That sounds great, but I think the more powerful thing is to do the shadow work within, and you can change from the inside out. I think that a lot of these don't necessarily bring into the quantum physics or the understanding the deeper parts of this, but we are who we choose to be in the present moment. We can heal our past. As we heal, we then realize that we hear our timeline. I know this is a little more esoteric, but I know it's true because I've been through it. And I've become, so what does the anxious person also has something to learn from the avoidant. And once again, the anxious and the avoidance attract each other. Avoidants normally do not attract other avoidants. Sometimes avoidance will attract emotionally unavailable men or women, but it's normally the avoidant will attract the anxious and the anxious will attract the avoidant. That's normally how it works. And sometimes if an anxious doesn't attract an anxious, then what happens is then one of them kind of falls into the avoidant pattern. I've had that happen. Where then I become more avoidant. Like for example, that ex-girlfriend, the first ex-girlfriend that I was talking about that was controlling, definitely more anxious. However, because she was so freaking anxious and it was such a turnoff to me in a way, and I was like always feeling like I was being controlled, I became avoidant. So it can change, but in general, you'll have one that you fell through from childhood trauma or childhood experience. So what I've had to learn is how to love myself, how to nurture myself, how to give myself the emotions I crave. And also, the most powerful shadow work I've done is actually a meditation where I imagine the child version of me, and I literally give that version of me love, nurturing, support. I listen to them. And as I do that, I begin to heal. There's an inner child inside every single one of us that craves love, attention. And based on what as a child we did, if we suppressed it, we repressed it, that is a pattern that may be on autopilot. Now, the avoidant side of this, the shadow work for the avoidant, is to become aware that there was at some point in your past a level of trust that was broken. Could have been a parent that abused you. Could have been someone else that abused you. Could have been something someone said they would do, but they didn't. Could have been a parent abandoning you. And when these things happen, guess what happens? You then say, well, I got close to someone before in my past. I was close with someone in my life. And then they broke that trust. And then now there's a lot of pain. And maybe this whole love thing isn't really worth it. Maybe it's safer if I put this cocoon around myself and I stay more independent. And it's a lot of times what happens with avoidant. So the key is being aware of this and then doing the shadow work. And literally that the avoidant can do is look at their child version of them, do a meditation, and listen to the childlike inner child. Let them know, hey, I'm here, it's safe. So the avoidant doesn't think it's safe to love, safe to get close, safe to be intimate. But it is if you let go of that belief, if you let go and you heal that past inner child. And what you do is you do a meditation, you send that inner child love, and you start to nurture your own inner child. And you realize it's safe now to become vulnerable. It's safe to connect to other people. You can even start with just friends and family. It doesn't have to be romantic at first. And for the anxious, it's about loving yourself. It's giving yourself that validation, nurturing yourself. For the anxious, about nurturing, and for the avoidant, it's about trusting. And as you do, you begin to see that this is really, all these attachment styles are really about your relationship to self. It's like, how do I get my needs met? But the anxious has a belief system that says that the love is outside of myself, because when they were kids, they were dependent on their parents and they didn't get their needs completely met. So what happens is then they develop a belief system that they have to search for it on the outside, and then that causes them to be anxious. The belief system of an avoidant is that I can't completely trust. I did trust in the past. When I did, there was pain. Therefore, I shouldn't trust and I need to be independent. These are both just beliefs. They're both just stories. You want to change your relationship to love and you want to attract love in, change your stories about these things. This is the shadow work that is involved. The shadow is the unconscious part of ourselves, not understanding, why do I attract unavailable women or unavailable men? Why, when I get into relationships, do I always mess it up? When I'm attracting love, why does this happen? Why does that happen? Well, what are your stories? It's taking responsibility for it. It's not the external world. It's not everyone else that's messed up. Eventually, you need to realize that taking responsibility is not taking responsibility and blaming yourself and feeling guilty. It's taking responsibility for the meaning you give things and then making a new choice about who you are. I'm going to trust now. I'm going to nurture myself. I'm going to fill up my own cup. The anxious and the avoidant. The anxious can learn from the avoidant how to be more independent. The avoidant can learn from the anxious how to be more intimate and close. There's a lesson there. Just like people pleaser, narcissist. The people pleaser is the exact opposite, is the exact epitome, unbalanced side of the anxious, and a narcissist is the complete, side of the avoidant, the extreme side of it. My dad, people pleaser. My ex-stepmom, narcissist. What can they learn from each other? Well, I can see that my dad's meant to learn how to be more independent and how to stand up for something. And the narcissist of my ex-stepmom learned empathy and stuff like that. Didn't happen, may not happen in this life, but that's the idea. That's what can be learned from each side of the spectrum. That's the shadow work. And the thing that I've been helping my dad with is learning how to not be a nice guy, because I'm like, Dad, this is a pattern that I had to shed a couple years ago and really shed this year. And my dad's may start dating and stuff like this again. And when he does, I'm like, Dad, this is how you have to be a little bit, not different, but this is what you have to do. You have to do what you want to do. If you want to be attractive to the feminine, then you have to be in your masculine frame and doing what you want to do, and then let her join and be a part of that frame to feel safe in that frame. Rather than doing what everyone else wants you to do. And it's a balance, right? A narcissist doesn't need to hear that. The narcissist or the avoidant, and not all avoidants are narcissists, this is the extreme version of it. It's about just becoming aware of these patterns and doing that shadow work so that you attract more of what you really want. So the shadow work of attracting love is really about also getting to your own, one of the most like powerful ways to develop magnetic energy is to be doing what you love for a living and to be the star of your own movie. And by star of your own movie, I mean just like filling up your own cup. We're brainwashed growing up to be watching Disney movies, to believe that there's this Prince Charming or this princess that we're going to eventually meet, and we're all going to live happily ever after. And we wait for it, we wait for it, we wait for it. And the more we wait, the more it's not here because we're in the vibration of waiting. One of the best things we can do is to fill up our own cup. And as if someone's an avoidant listening to this, they're like, yeah, fill up your own cup. Be independent. Lean into what's uncomfortable. The level to which you lean into what's uncomfortable is when you get into the unknown. If you really want to attract love, here's what you do. You look at your how you are showing up in the world. Look at the maybe parts where you're not being vulnerable in your life. Look at parts to where you're maybe not standing up for yourself. Look at parts to where you're not being the star of your own movie, and then make new choices about who you are. And then what I recommend you do is get into the unknown. Challenge the old beliefs, challenge the old shadow, become aware of these different patterns in your life. Ask your mom, ask your dad, how was it growing up? What kind of energy was I around growing up? And see why you are the way you are. You don't need to know every little answer, but the more you become aware of this, the more you see that most of these things are just stories that you bought into at a certain point. And because they're stories, you can change those stories by becoming aware of them and letting them go. And then what you do is you begin to do what you're passionate about. When you're doing what you're passionate about, you are in the vibration of who you really are. When you're in the vibration of who you really are, you're going to attract somebody that is a great reflection, a great match to who you are. If you are working a job you hate, you are being this person that you think you have to be, you're going to attract someone else that is also working a job they hate and trying to be someone they think they need to be because they're not being their authentic self. There's many, when I had ex-girlfriends in the past, I had an ex-girlfriend when I used to work at Nordstrom's, and guess what? We both didn't like our jobs. We were both working there, and we both wanted to do something else. And we attracted each other. We weren't being our true selves. Even after that, I was working at Barney's. I had another girlfriend. She was also not doing what she was really passionate about, and guess what? We were in a relationship, and we both wanted to be somewhere else. Then, guess what? I started doing what I love. I started making videos. Guess who I then met? I met somebody that was in a relationship that did exactly what I love, that had the freedom that we could travel and do stuff like that. And I was in a relationship with her for about a year. And even though it didn't work out, guess what? That's a direct reflection of who I was. It was a much deeper relationship as well. As much as, and I still love, I still love this person. We're still great friends. However, that's the idea, is understanding you always get a reflection of where you are. So the quicker you start being who you really are, the quicker you're going to actually attract the person you're maybe meant to be with, the deepest connection you could possibly have. But doing the shadow work is about becoming aware of why aren't you living that way? It'd been shadow work for me to realize, why am I working a 9-to-5 job I freaking hate? Go for what I love. Make a new choice about who I am. Be that version of me. And then what is my beliefs about women? What is my belief about men? Because even though it's not a love relationship always, but you be becoming aware of your beliefs, you know? When I've had friends that have kind of turned against me in the past, I may have started to develop a belief system that I can't trust my friends. That's kind of what happened with remember that first ex-girlfriend I was telling you about? My friend, I broke up with her, and then he took her side, and I had pretty much a whole group of friends that took her side because she was the victim of the one I broke up with. And guess what happened? For like 3 or 4 months, I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to talk to them anymore. They chose sides. Bros before, never mind. But that was the idea. Like, they chose her, and he chose her because he actually had a crush on her, is interesting enough. And then 3 or 4 years later, he was totally bored by all she was doing was venting about me. I think he thought maybe, if I listen to her enough, then maybe she'll eventually like me. Didn't happen. But eventually, he realized, hey, I miss Aaron. I want to be around Aaron. That whole entire group of friends came back to me like 3 months later. But then I started to develop this belief. I started to have this little guard up around just even friends in a way. It's like, oh, they could turn on me at any point, so I need to be more independent. But what I learned how to do is I learned that I can trust, and I have my own guidance mechanism. I can tell when certain people, have a different intentions and stuff like that. I'm very good at reading people. And I developed that because of my ex-stepmom and many different situations. But in general, I had to change my beliefs about not just love, but even love friendships, right? Like even family members. And as I changed my beliefs about it, it's changed my whole entire life. So 90% of transformation is becoming aware of what the shadow is. And the way you become aware of the shadow is you inquire about it. You ask questions about it. These anxious, avoidant things, don't fall into the trap of thinking you're always going to be anxious, you're always going to be avoidant. No, you be secure. You be secure. All you got to do to be secure, what you got to do? You become aware of the childhood trauma, send that inner child version of you love, and realize that you are whole, you are complete. And as you do that, you'll feel more worthy, you'll fill up your cup, and you're more likely to attract love. But to develop magnetic energy, be the star of your own movie. Do what you love. Become the authentic self. I have an episode on magnetic energy. That's actually one of the most popular episodes I put out. It's a solo episode of me talking about how to have magnetic energy. It's on the podcast. Plus, it's in the there's a YouTube video of it as well. That's like the recording of it. So you can check that out too. And you can see how to develop magnetic energy. And let me know what you guys thought of this episode. If you want me to make more about shadow work, let me know. You could do me a favor as well and review this podcast on iTunes. That would mean the world to me. If you don't have an iPhone, ask a friend to borrow their iPhone, and that's a way of giving back. What do you call that? Reciprocity? Whatever it's called. But anyways, I'd really appreciate it if you reviewed the podcast. Helps the podcast grow. I have a second YouTube channel, if you didn't know, Aaron Doughty Podcast. And when you go there, you will see that you can subscribe to it. And I videos version of this. This video is on the second YouTube channel, the whole video too. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace, much love, and namaste.